All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I believe we have a number of folks on here. It's hard for me to see behind the curtain, but welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's adventure session. If you are tuning in today and you're new to the First Sense community, First Sense is a global adventure community for young adults impacted by cancer, multiple sclerosis, and other serious health conditions. You can learn more about our programs and our community by visiting our website. We're pretty easy to find out there, but it's www.firstdsense.org. My name is Ryan O'Donohue, otherwise known as Wolf within our community. Hopefully we can get this chat feature going and or drop your name and your nickname into the Q&A. Would love to know who's joining and where you're from. We started hosting our adventure sessions in 2019 at our First Sense Ball in Vail, Colorado. And adventure sessions are really an opportunity to inform and entertain and really inspire the members of the First Sense community. And our guests, they all have one thing in common. They share stories of healing and transformation and self-discovery, and really a passion for First Sense and our mantra, outliving it. I couldn't be more excited about today's guest, but before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping items. We're recording tonight's discussion. It will be uploaded on the First Sense YouTube channel in the coming days, so please share this out with others who are unable to join us live. We'll also have a short Q&A following the conversation, so please submit any questions using the Q&A feature. Hopefully that's enabled. We'll get through as many as we can. And without further ado, today's Adventure Sessions guest is Ben the Butcher Wright. Ben is the founder, board chair, and CEO of Velocity Global, a company that is truly reimagining the future of work through its innovative global platform. You can obviously learn more about Velocity Global by finding them online, also very easy to find. But going back to our first meeting, we share a special friendship and partnership with Ben and the team from Velocity Global since becoming office neighbors back in 2014. And through our proximity and our shared passions, we become ingrained in one another's lives. There is so much I could share about the value of our partnership with Velocity Global, but in short, it has really helped us to dream big about our true potential as an organization. And I think you'll get a sense of why that is throughout tonight's discussion with Ben. So without further ado, again, Ben the Butcher, welcome and thank you for joining us.
What's up, Wolf? What's up, First Sense community? Man, amazing to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Nothing else I'd rather be doing. Nobody else I'd rather be doing it with. Great to get some time with you all this evening. And just appreciate you taking time out of your day for me and for us.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm sure those who are tuning in would agree as well. Ben, before we dive into your recent World Marathon Challenge and that whole experience, take us back to, I guess, your early involvement with First Sense and back when we first met. What drew you to our mission?
Oh, man. How long do we have, Ryan? Are we here to talk about that? Or seriously, though, joking aside, I'm actually going to take you all the way back. So I started this company, Velocity Global, in 2014, and my wife, Julie Wright, who is now on the board of First Sense as well, and been very involved. At the time, she was working for Genentech. And as most on this probably know, Genentech has always been a really important partner for First Sense. And she used to tell me about First Sense and the partnership, and I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, that's cool. That sounds interesting. And then we moved into my very first office space. We moved into a building in Denver called Industry. And we're walking down the hall, and my wife, Julie, looks over and goes, oh my God, that's the First Sense. That's who I was telling you about. And I was like, oh, well, that's crazy. That's kind of cool. We'll have to get to know them. And we got to be friends in the building. We got to be friends over the ping pong table. And then FD invited me to come be a camp mom, to come be a volunteer at one of the, and I'm making light of like, oh, it was interesting to kind of check it out. I was certainly interested in the work that you all are doing, but when I got to see it with my own eyes, and when I got to see I just hear the echoes of Cheddar Bunny in my head going, the healing power of adventure. I get to witness it with all the participants, and honestly, frankly, every single one of us involved, whether we were participants or volunteers or not. And that's what really set it on fire for me.
Yeah, without a doubt. Those who've been out to a program, whether it be as a participant, as a member of our staff, as a volunteer, as an outfitter or guide of the experience, everyone really, there are these beautiful lifelong bonds that are forged at those programs. And so, yeah, I think that's usually where it gets any of us hook, line, and sinker is out there adventuring together. Yeah, being part of a shared experience. Some additional background on our partnership with Velocity Global. It really inspired us to take our first steps beyond oncology, a conversation that we had long debated. And our partnership with you all has since supported our ability to serve hundreds of young adults impacted by MS and beyond through your leadership and through your giving. And so obviously, thank you on behalf of our entire team and our entire community. But let's take this opportunity to shift gears to and put some attention on this World Marathon Challenge. So for many, the thought of running a marathon, let alone actually running the marathon, is enough to make you tired. But then when you hear about someone who's attempting to run 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days, it's honestly mind-blowing. So can you help myself and those joining in this evening understand where did this all begin? Where did this idea come to life?
Oh man. So I started getting into a bit more endurance type events I'm 46 now, probably my mid 30s. Started getting into cycling, and I started just realizing that, if you kind of push yourself, you can go further. And, especially on 2 wheels with that propulsion, I mean, you could really just go see the world. And it motivated me to kind of do more longer events. And then I had a friend who said, I'm doing this ultra. And I was like, that sounds crazy. But she said, honestly, you should do one. They're a ton of fun. And so on a whim, I just kind of said, okay, I'll do it. So I signed up for a 50K. So I'd never done a marathon. But I signed up for a 50K and went and did it. And it was honestly tough. But I found the training to be absolutely amazing. And the training in and of itself was kind of the most fun and transformational. And so it kind of had me down a path, and I ended up doing an event called the Trans Rockies. And the Trans Rockies, and did that with partnership with First Ascents. There were several First Ascents employees that came and did it along with me, which was way cool. And for those who don't know, you start in central Colorado, little town called Buena Vista, and you run to Avon Vale. And it's a 6-day stage race, and it's all at altitude, and it's all trails, and you camp every night. And no wonder there were people from First Ascents involved. It's perfect. It's almost it's very demanding, but it's almost like a week-long program. And in the training for that, Wolf, I was actually for Velocity Global. We do for works. We do business all over the world. I was in Sydney, Australia. And I was in training, and I had to go out that day and do a 16-mile run. And as I set off, I realized, oh my gosh, if I were to extend this to 26 miles today, then I will have run a marathon distance on 4 continents that year. And at that point was yeah, no brainer. That sounds like a lot of fun. Let's do that. So I ran it. I got home back to the hotel, did the 26, and I Googled and I said, can you run a marathon on every continent? Can you run a marathon on Antarctica? And this popped up. And I thought, man, not only could I get to run a marathon on every continent, you could knock them all out in 7 days. And the very first thought that came to my mind is that even possible? And I then realized this is the 5th or 6th time that they've done it. 50 athletes each time. So obviously it's possible. And two, I was honestly thinking about that whole kind of challenge by choice, mantra that we talk about here at First Descents, and thinking it doesn't even sound possible, but it clearly is. Do I have something like that inside me? And so it was interesting. Again, I just ran it. And as we were sitting in Cape Town getting ready to start, I was curious and I was like, I wonder when I signed up for this thing, because COVID happened and everything, right?
Right. Yeah.
We first race was on January 31st of this year. I got the registration email from the race director on December 30th, 2019. So I've been prepping for this race for over 3 years.
That's amazing. Yeah. And just for the context here, Ben, you were one of 49 competitors that took on the World Marathon Challenge just 6 weeks ago. Your personal fundraising campaign raised over $1 million to support First Descents. Truly, truly incredible. And take us through a little bit of that. Obviously, you're mentioning 2019, you started to envision what this might be. COVID hits. And then I know that there have been other, just getting the race back up and running international event like this has its own challenges. All along, I guess I can't even imagine the mental fortitude to kind of keep this goal in mind, but then also at the same time thinking about the training plan. So what was, I guess, help us. You mentioned, when you first did your ultra, the training fired you up. What does a training plan look like? Obviously, and help us understand maybe some of the hiccups along the way with the start and stops of the race, and how do you even navigate something? Obviously, people who've done it before might have had successful training plans, but it's hard to replicate a training plan considering the turbulent times that we were navigating just globally as a society. So what did that look like for you?
For sure. So I got the registration December 30th, 2019. They were running it in February. So, and he said, we're fully subscribed, we're fully booked. So you'll be in the next one. And I said, great, I've got over a year to train. I can do this, right? I got over a year to train. And then COVID hit, right? So we knew basically pretty early that we weren't going to be running in 2020 or early 2021. He'd hoped to run it actually late 2021, but that got pushed out again. So it got pushed back one more year to October of 2022. And then actually a few months before that, they ended up with a trouble with the plane that was going to take us all around and the reservation. So it got pushed out again until January. But anyway, I was running, obviously, do some of the training. And one of the things I realized when it got pushed out, and this is 2020 to 2021. So I said, I got a year to train for this thing. It became pretty clear that it was going to be later 2021. I'd already been running kind of a decent amount in 2020 to plan for it. On December 31st, I was laying in bed. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And it just, for whatever reason, the thought came to me, I'll tell you one thing to eliminate any excuses in 2021 to train for this thing. And it's to set a goal to run every day. So never give yourself an excuse, never take a day off, just run every day. And just by doing that, you're going to get mileage, you're going to get the repetition. And then also, again, you'll have long days, you'll have short days, but you'll never have an excuse the next day. And I knew that was going to be important when it came time to training. It kept getting pushed out. And so honestly, 2021 just ended up being a run every day. My commitment to myself was, it was a minimum of 2 miles. So I'd run longer days, I'd run shorter days, but the shorter days were a minimum of 2 miles and I would do that. And then as we rolled into 2022, I said, well, that was a lot of fun, knocked out 365 days. I'm just going to do it again and continue to run every year, especially because that was the year the World Marathon Challenge was actually going to happen. And so I rolled it forward, just for what it's worth. The streak is still alive.
Yeah, I was
last
gonna,
week.
I was gonna ask, where are we at right now, Ben? I know you shared this with me recently, but what's the current number?
Yeah, I crossed the 800 straight day mark late last week, I think. So it's still alive.
Well, I know those listening in and joining us tonight are no strangers to having their plans put on hold, right? A cancer diagnosis, a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, certainly is, especially at the time, in the time of life as a young adult, looking around at your peer group, people are, navigating relationships and their careers and, starting families. And then here you are faced with this challenge. What I'm hearing here is one of the key messages that you took forward in your process was kind of just taking that next best step and trying to just understand, what can I do? What are the known knowns? What can I do next? Knowing that there's really no clear, I guess, perfect plan and foresight into when you're going to be able to kind of revisit those plans that you had originally hoped and dreamed.
No question, but so many parallels with so many things that I've learned on this first ascent journey, Wolf, right? Of your best laid plans and things just get in the way, right? And difference, yet I imagine there has to be parallels. For me, the most extreme version of it was like we were training up and we were trained up and we were getting ready, and come late summer, we were going to do it in October this last year. And so when the email came out for the third or fourth time it was getting postponed, the motivation that very next day to get up and run was like, it was almost nil, right? And like I got the feeling and I got the sense potentially, of what it could be like when you're just met with something, some really serious news that again kind of derails whatever kind of plans you have. How do you pick yourself up that next day? And one of the things, Wolf, again, this is just dumb luck, but one of the things I did that was most impactful was just committing to myself to run every single day, like never giving myself an excuse not to. And there was a huge lesson for me in that, in anything in life, but it's that it's boringly consistent. It's the setting of habits. How many books have been written about this stuff, but it's true. If you set a daily intention and you set a daily habit, the excuses just go out the door. I'll share with you that for the next week, I still had a training plan that I didn't follow very closely, right? So I ran every day, but I was supposed to do a 12-mile day, and it was like a 3-mile day. I was supposed to do a track day, and I just ran around my neighborhood, right? And I found myself in kind of a little bit of malaise, and it was interesting. I went back and I have a running coach, and I went back and listened to the podcast that he and I did on one of the runs, and I was just dragging. And in that podcast, the guy's name is Chris Hauth, by the way, Hauth. You guys should check him out. He's like one of the foremost endurance coaches in the world. He also happens to coach me. But he said, there's going to come a time in your training when you're not going to want to continue, or anything in life, right? Where you're just not going to want to continue. And if you don't understand your deeper why, you may quit. And it was on that run. I remember like the exact street I was on. It was a half marathon day. I remember the time of the day. I remember the temperature. I remember I was there. And I remember having this aha moment that I have to go back to the why that I'm doing this. What is important, the why that I'm doing it. And it literally, yes, I was going through the motions, but I wasn't really applying myself to it. And my training program changed that day.
Tell us more about this deeper why.
The deeper why is, and I'm not certain I've totally gotten to the bottom of like what's the deepest part of that why.
Right.
But for me, that deeper why was wanting to try something that just seemed impossible.
Right.
And I could say that it's to challenge myself to do these sort of things, but it truly is. When I look back on my life, at the end of my life, I don't want to say, boy, I wish I could have packed more stuff into it. I don't wish I could look back on my life and say, I wish I'd challenged myself more. I don't want to look back on my life and say, I just didn't apply myself to the very best way that I possibly could. And for me, if something just seems impossible, then I want to go see if I could potentially tackle it. Again, what's deeper and under that? I don't know if I've gotten there yet, but it's enough.
Well, I think it really is an embodiment of that outliving its spirit. And I think, we ask our participants to take that leap of faith and join us on these adventures that in some ways seem impossible, even for somebody who loves adventure. I go out to a whitewater kayaking program. I don't know how to whitewater kayak, and the idea of getting down safely a rapid without flipping over and being terrified is, it seems impossible. And I think the beauty of it
Yeah.
is just that courage to be able to take that leap of faith, and that's obviously certainly something you've done in this challenge. Another thing we know is so important within our community is just the importance and the strength that we find in our community and in the support systems around us. Can you share a little bit more about, give us a glimpse into what did that look like for you, right? Obviously, you're a father, or you're a business leader, tremendous demands, in life. What were your outlets? Where did you find inspiration? And just kind of where did you find, I don't know, that solace that allowed you to just keep pushing forward?
In some ways, all the pressure drove the need for a release. So,
Right.
when you have, I mean, we've just been so blessed as a business. We have 800 employees across 6 continents. But the pressure of waking up every morning knowing that you got 800 people's payroll that you're responsible for, right? I've got two kids, 2 amazing kids, 11 and 14. They're so busy, so active. So we as a family, can't fit anything more possibly in our lives. I mean, that's how we operate.
Yeah.
Which Wolf, but it's, there's just so much going on there. Try to be a good father, try to be a good husband, try to be a good son, try to be a good friend, try to be a good colleague, try to be a good business leader. Sometimes you just need a release.
Right.
And in many ways, that's what it really almost ended up becoming. And there is nothing. This is what we take a quick aside, Wolf. I hated running.
I was going to ask, when did you? I know this a little bit about you, and I know that you weren't a big runner. And so, what was that turning point for you?
Yeah, I hated running. In high school, I did track and field, and let's be clear, it was field, right? In fact, one time I was like laying on the high jump mat. I was a pretty good jumper, and I was laying on the high jump mat one time, and the coach was like, "Right, come on, we need someone to do a relay. Get over there, do like the 4x100 or the 4x400." And I don't know whether it was, obstinacy because I hated running, or I was just that awful at it. But I did like one lap, and he's like, "Go back to the high jump pit, like get out of here." And I hated it, man. But what changed for me is when I was training for that very first ultra. What changed for me is when you start reaching a level of fitness where at the 45-minute mark, and that's actually kind of a magic number for me. At the 45-minute mark, you feel like you're just finally starting to settle in. Yeah. And you really start hitting your rhythm and your groove at the 45-minute mark. And for someone who hated running and never ran, like that just blew my mind. Like, how can it possibly be that I can actually really settle into a rhythm at like mile 4, mile 5, mile 6? And then it became on like the longer runs, and what I used to run with music all the time. And once I learned to drop music, the whole next level happened where it gives you the opportunity to just think and be out there in nature. And the metronome sound of your feet hitting the pavement over and over and over and over and over again. And pushing yourself, to a level that just you never thought possible. That's really kind of where that magic started to happen for me.
It's definitely. What advice would you give to people like myself, for example, who never been a distance runner, love the idea of it, right? Because no matter where you go, you can, in most cases, go for a run. Whereas that's not the case when you're a cyclist or whatever the case may be. If you're traveling, right, it's nice to be able to just get out and get that that release. What advice would you give to those, and maybe try and dig deep into the memory banks, because now you're on such a different level as an elite runner? What is it like? I guess, how do you work your way up to that point where you can actually run consistently for 45 minutes, where you actually kind of have that tipping point, have those moments, and start to feel like, wow, I can do this? Because I think one of, just speak for myself here, one of my biggest challenges, I'll go out for a run and my low back starts to hurt, or like my form's not great. And so I just, it starts to wear on me, and I just chalk it up and I'm like, I'm just not built for this. So, and I know that's just a little bit of a cop out. So what advice would you give to those who are like, hey, they want to become, they want to reach a level of fitness where they can go out for a run, enjoy that run, feel that runner's high, which again, scientifically, there's some evidence there.
Yeah. Honestly, the most simple thing you can do is set a 30-day running plan, right? Just set a 30-day running plan and tier it up. First day, run a mile.
Yeah.
Second day, run 2 miles, right? Third day, run a mile. Second or fourth day, run 2 miles in the morning and run 1 mile in the evening, right? Most people can go run a mile, right? Even if you're fast, it's 8 minutes. If you're slow, it's 12 minutes, right?
Yeah, right.
Anybody can go run 12 minutes. Like, you can't, right? Within reason, right? I totally understand there are potentially physical limitations, right? So I want to be very clear, right? There are potentially physical limitations where that is hard or impossible for some people to do, but and you just do that, and you tear up. And what's crazy is by the fourth week, you'll be doing 10-mile, you can be doing a 10-mile, 12-mile day. And it was honestly, that 10 or 12-mile day is going to be easier than your first 2-mile day.
Right. Yeah, and I think that in one way, just kind of relate a bit to our community. I feel in my life, if I don't get outside, even if that just means I live by a nice park, it even just means getting outside, getting the dog out, getting some fresh air, feeling the elements of the outdoors. I'm just not the same person without that. I think what I would encourage members of our community, regardless of where you're at in your diagnosis and where you are in your treatment, definitely embrace that outliving its spirit and try and spend a little bit of time outdoors and tap into those elements. I imagine part of the running, and Ben, correct me here, but part of that running is kind of that kind of tangible, that connection with the out, the world that we live in, right? And getting out there and feeling those elements.
It's 804 straight days of running or something like that.
Yeah.
Not one of them has been on a treadmill. That's 804 straight days outside, regardless of the weather. There's been days where there's been 1.5 feet of snow on the ground, and you have to wait long enough where the cars drive through the neighborhood so you can run through their tracks, kind of thing. Or 100-degree days, where you just get out and go suffer. There's something magical about being outside.
So in terms of, obviously you've talked about your commitment, just making that commitment to get up, to run every day. I guess were there, and again, you've spoken about just kind of the responsibility and how this was a bit of a release. The highs and the lows of this, can you share a little bit more about that? I obviously was incredibly entertained following your story mainly on Instagram, and just seeing on day 2 as an example, feeling like you got shot out of a cannon, and then having turning points along the way. Can you tell us a little bit about what those highs and lows were? And then just, again, how did you cope with those as you were probably, where did your mind go? Where did you go emotionally, spiritually, mentally, obviously physically? This is quite the feat. Tell us a little bit more about that experience.
For sure. Maybe if you'll allow me, Ryan, let me just kind of walk everyone through like the actual structure of how the event works, because I think that context will probably help. So we all queued up on like the 28th or 29th of January in Cape Town, South Africa. And let me tell you, it was the 29th. And let me tell you, the anticipation on the 29th of knowing I had to wait until the 31st to stop running was almost the hardest part, right? Like, I had been training for 3 years for this thing. By the way, I don't know how Olympic athletes train for 4 years. Like I literally can't even wrap my head around it. 3 years was, I mean, I can't believe I trained this long for this event. But we were 2 days away. I was already in Cape Town. I'm like, can we just run already? Like, can we just go do this? And so we were sitting around in Cape Town. It was Sunday morning, the 30th. And we were, basically waiting. We had like we had a briefing or something that afternoon. We were going to leave the next morning for Antarctica. And by the way, you have 7 days to complete, right? All 7 marathons. And the race director sends out this urgent message and says, by the way, Karan, my buddy, and I were running it with, we were saying, we were looking at the weather. I don't know how they have weather forecasts in Antarctica, but they do. And the weather forecast for this place said it was going to be 25 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And we both looked at each other and we're like, that's crap, man. It's 15 and cloudy in Denver. Like, if we're going to be in Antarctica, it should feel like Antarctica. Right. We were lamenting. Well, careful what you ask for.
Right.
We get this urgent message and he says, weather's changing. We got to go. Everybody grab your stuff. We're going to head to the airport and we're leaving 12 hours early. So we actually started the whole thing early. We got on this old Russian transport plane, flew down to Antarctica. Gun goes off. That's the first race. We come back to Cape Town, second race. You get on a different plane for the rest, which was a Airbus that we had chartered for all the other kind of 5 stops. And you went to Perth, Australia. You went to Dubai. You went to Madrid. You went to Fortaleza, Brazil, and then you went to Miami. And again, just a little bit more background. So we'd start 12 hours early in Antarctica. We finish it. We come back to Cape Town. We end up with a surprise extra night in a hotel because we weren't supposed to leave till 12 hours later. So we all got a night to sleep in the hotel and everybody's going, God, that's great. So we run the next morning and then we're supposed to leave that afternoon for Perth. But the other flight that we had, the other airplane we had, someone didn't fill out the right paperwork and it was stuck in Madrid. And we lost about 24 hours. And so I just share that because what was supposed to be then 5 marathons in 5 days, ended up becoming basically 4 marathons in almost 3 days at the very end because everything got so tight. So highs and lows. I'll start with the lows. They say that the third marathon is kind of tough. When you get down to Antarctica, it was 25 below, 50-mile-an-hour winds, which was a tailwind on the way out and a headwind on the way back. And we had to do just these out and backs because the weather was so bad. And it was just a grind. It was a grind for everybody and it was cold. But like, it's the first one, you just kind of do it.
Right.
We get back to Cape Town and I started feeling a little bit off, but I just figured it was, I don't know, the excitement or something else going on. We went and run that race. And like you said, I was shot out of a cannon. The first 16 miles, I was running like a 7:30, 7:45 miles, something like that, which for me is really fast.
Right.
And it ended up being just an amazing day. But then I got back to the room and I just didn't feel right. And we ended up, again, because of the delay, having a whole nother night in the room. And so at this point, you're going, aside from that quick trip to Antarctica, I've now spent like 5 days in Cape Town. And that's not what I did this for. I did this to go do 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days. And it didn't feel like a South Africa marathon. I don't know what I was thinking, Ryan. Because I travel all over the world. When we got to Cape Town, there was a bottle of water right there and there was a cup. And I said, I don't want to waste plastic. I'll just use the tap and I'll fill my cup up. Don't know what I was thinking. Apparently you're not supposed to drink the water in Cape Town. So that set in after the second race. And that night after the second race in Cape Town, like I get into the covers and I was just drenched in sweat. And as soon as like you pull the cover up a little bit, you're jackhammering, you're so cold. And, TMI, but I was in the bathroom countless times that night, right? And it just set me off for honestly, the next 3 days, the next 4 races were all really, really tough because I I didn't have an
Yeah.
appetite. Even what I was eating, I just didn't retain. Perth was the worst. I was in the bathroom just countless times. I was thrown up on the course. What was 25 below in Antarctica? It was 95 and 3 in the afternoon in Perth. Um, it was awful. And there's unquestionably that Perth marathon. It was a low point, and it was honestly the hardest thing I've ever done.
What I imagine, that's unbelievable. I imagine people have questions. I know I have questions about just how do you manage your nutrition both throughout training and throughout a competitive event like this, but then how do you then manage your nutrition on top of getting a stomach virus? I guess, how do you even motivate to rally to the occasion there? What was your approach there, Ben? It's just I've been in this thing for 3 years. I'm just
That's it. It's the same thing. You don't give your an excuse to take a day off from running. You don't give yourself an excuse when you have to get out there and run, right?
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
remember talking to you a few years ago when you had gotten COVID, which many of us have over the years, regardless of vaccination or whatever, just because of the circumstances. And I remember you were you were going out for a run. I was quite amazed, but this is a whole new level. I mean, you're out there doing multiple marathons daily here, and how did you manage your nutrition throughout that?
you know, I tell you about well, let me tell you about one thing just real quick, Ryan.
Sure.
And then I'll tell you about the nutrition. Something fascinating happened with running every day. I was already running a decent amount, but when I decided to not take a day off, that first year in mid-March, everything fell apart. And you talk about how, when you run at a certain point, your back hurts or things tighten up. You're like, I'm just not fit for this. In about mid-March, I literally was convinced I was going to need a hip replacement. Like it killed, and my whole leg killed. And for about 30 to 45 days, I said, I'm just going to keep going to see what happens. And I hobbled a lot of those days, 2 miles. I mean, kind of like peg leg Ryan again for 30, 45 days. And something magical happened, man. It went away. And when I, again, was convinced, I was like, I don't have the right body for this. I don't have the right type. People tell me you shouldn't run every day. You clearly shouldn't run every day. Right. And so on and so forth. But what's actually happening is it was a test, man. And you had to get through it. And I got through it. And something magical happened afterwards where whenever something came up thereafter, and you could potentially get injuries that you truly have to stop for, right? But what I found is everything that my head told me was like an injury you have to stop. None of them were.
Right.
And that was so important. And COVID was one. I had COVID and I was like, well, I'm not going to not run today. So I'm going to get out and run. And word of the wise, if you get COVID, you feel a lot better when you run. It's weird. It totally happened. So actually, I started feeling bad that same afternoon. So I went for a second run that day, and it helped both times. But anyway, the point is, on those really hard times, Ryan, every day that I went out there that I didn't want to run, every day that I went out there that I felt like I needed a hip replacement, or I was on a trail run and I badly sprained my ankle. And for the next month, as I hobbled around on a bad ankle, not allowing myself the excuse not to run, every single one of those were put in the bank for when I was out running this marathon. Yeah. Right. And so I wasn't retaining food, so be it. Right. I've been through tough stuff. So, so my leg hurt, so my tendonitis was acting up, any one of those things, like you just didn't give yourself an excuse. So
that's just incredible. Well, Ben, thank you so much so far. I want to make sure that we have some time for the Q&A. I know our community is excited to ask some questions here. The first one is anonymous. As a father of two, what's more difficult? Is it more difficult to carry a newborn roughly 10 to 12 to 14 pounds around in many odd positions late into the night, or more difficult to train and run and compete in the World Marathon Challenge? Again, anonymous question.
Being a new father. Actually being a new father.
I joke, but here I want to get into the community questions. Thank you all for your patience as we've gone through this incredibly inspiring conversation with the butcher here. Not a question, but wanted to say thank you so much for what you and Spicy Latte have done to help build the MS program with First Sense. My experience in Estes Park was life-changing. Tess Janeway O'Hara. There you go.
Janeway, what's up?
There's
Janeway,
a
it's good
number
to
of
hear from
shout
you.
outs here for you. Proud of you and great work from the professor who you know from our first the pilot MS program that we did together in 2018. Thank you, Professor. You the man. Thanks for joining here. Listening in from New York City, ran the New York City Marathon this last year with FD. 7 sounds pretty gnarly. Presto. Ben, you're a great inspiration. FD changed my life as well. Thank you for all you do. Jackie Kipp. Last shout out here, and then we'll dive into some questions. I'm inspired and so grateful for both Ben and Ryan and all their teams are doing. Everything they're saying resonates on multiple levels. And I've seen through a loved one who joined a rock climbing trip in Moab last summer, the impact the first ascents can have. Thank you, Katie. Questions, Ben. What metaphysical experience, if any, did you have during the 7th and final marathon? From Karen.
Oh my gosh, I can, yeah. Thank you, Karen. I think I know who that Karen is. I don't remember my feet touching the pavement.
Oh, that is wild.
I do have memories of the metronome of my feet, but I don't remember them actually touching the pavement.
Just physically, like it was like you were on a cloud.
You know, you hear about some of these elite athletes or Tibetan monks or whoever, right? I mean, talk about how they reach this flow state. I've never been in a place like that, and I was in there that day, and it was a combination of factors. One is it was the last and final, and you knew if I'd gotten through Perth, and honestly Madrid was brutal for me too, but I knew if I'd gotten through Perth, I could also get through Madrid. I was physically in a worse place for Madrid, but mentally I was so much tougher because I got through Perth. And so once you've done that, and once you're on the 7th, like, you know, you can finish, right? You just know. 2, I had a tremendous tribe and squad, right? There were people from First Descents. There were family members there. There were friends who came from Denver. There were friends who came from kind of the Eastern Seaboard. I mean, it was unbelievable, kind of the outpouring, and they were there to cheer me along the way. And a number of them got on bikes and they were doing some of the laps with me. And a few folks even ran with me for part of it. And, you know, I've never had that experience before. I could have run a 6-minute marathon if I wanted to. Like, not only do I remember my feet touching the ground, I ran my second fastest marathon of the week, which was if memory serves me, it was a 3:50 marathon. And my heart rate never got above zone 1.
Wow. I just got chills hearing the first part of that you just, floated your way through your 7th marathon. I'm going to ask this next question here from Donna Picarizza. What was your inspiration for competing in this amazing marathon?
Hi, Donna. The inspiration was truly to try to do something that seemed impossible. It is something that I wanted to look back someday in my life and say, I can't believe I ran 7 marathons in 7 continents in 7 days. It's something that, I want to be, this is not a primary motivation, but I want to be an inspiration to my kids. I want to be inspiration to kind of those around me, that the impossible is possible. And the thing that holds us back so much are our own self-limiting beliefs. And again, you can read that on the internet all day and you can see all those books. I experienced it firsthand, right? Of how many times I felt like I couldn't do that. My buddy Karan that I ran with tore his meniscus 7 days before the event. 7 days. Wow. We went on a training run in Cape Town, and 2 miles in, he came up lame, and he's like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And I said, Karan, you're going to have to walk all 7 of those marathons. And so he hobbled his way through Antarctica And he realized if he could hobble his way through one, he can probably hobble his way through a second and hobble his way through a third. And because of his bad gait, he ended up with a stress fracture in his right leg, deep bruising in his left leg, on a torn meniscus. But he did 7 marathons and 7 continents in 7 days.
Wow.
And it just goes to show, right? It's our self-limiting beliefs. And so powering through those, Donna, was what was so important, combined with the fact, that I used as a platform to raise awareness and funds for First Ascents. And I know that there were so many people that were cheering me and cheering us on. I remember in Perth, it was such a bad day. And there were tears coming down my cheeks. And I was thinking, I don't even know if I can keep doing this. And I thought, I didn't come here to do 2 marathons in 2 days. I came here to do 7 marathons in 7 days. And there's people counting on me.
It's incredible. We have another question here from Jim. What specific memories do you think will crystallize in your mind and will remain there forever? I think we've heard some of them, but are there any that you haven't shared?
I will never forget Miami. It was the coolest, the damn coolest experience in the world. I'll never forget Dan Little. Dan Little was our oldest participant. He's 80 years old. And this World Marathon Challenge has been run 7 times, I think, and he's done 3 of them. And he was always the last on the course, but he finished it every single time. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget how bad the food was on the airplane. My buddy Karan once, and listen, don't forward this over to Richard, the race organizer, because he'll get really pissed at me. But he goes, "We'll have food. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome." The food was awful. It was like airplane food. And Karan fell asleep one time and woke up and kind of slept through breakfast. And the flight attendant walks by. He's like, hey, can I grab breakfast? And she said, "Oh, yes. Would you like fish or beans?"
Oh, no. Oh, before you go to run a marathon.
Yeah. And he was like, "Well, I ain't eating airplane fish anyway, certainly not for breakfast. So I guess I'll take the beans."
That's unreal, man. Stories for days here. Here's another great question from Sophia Carlton. What kept you going during the challenge? I think you've hit on this, but and another great question that dovetails on here. What were some of your mental toughness strategies from Megan Dahl? So what kept you going? What were some of your mental toughness strategies?
When I ran my first marathon distance in training, and this is going back, this was last year, 2022. I ended up kind of having a really tough day. I was running great, running strong, and my back kind of started to seize up, and my right leg went numb, and I ended up almost kind of having to drag my right foot along, but I wasn't going to allow myself to kind of quit and walk. And I remember telling myself at that time, and it was just having a tough day. I remember telling myself it was mile 19, and I said, you can quit on mile 20, you just can't quit on mile 19. And then we click over to mile 20, and I'd say, all right, you can quit on mile 21, but you can't quit on mile 20.
I love that.
And by doing just that, it was a slow day and it hurt like crazy, but I managed to run all 26 miles that day. And I needed that when it was in Perth, where I'll admit that was the first time first marathon I didn't run all of. I had to walk through some of it. But I do just tell myself, I'll allow myself to walk 1/10 of a mile at the mile, but you're going to run the other 9/10 of a mile. That combined with, Julie, or her FD first name, Spicy Latte, did an amazing thing for me in that she, and Ryan, you recorded one, that she reached out to some folks and had them each record kind of a quick 1 or 2 minute little video, and she compiled them together, and I downloaded it. And halfway through that Perth marathon, I just started playing it over and over and over again, and hearing the voices of my friends, my dear friends, my loved ones, just saying, you got this. There's going to be tough times, but you got it. Just don't quit. We're cheering on for you. That's what got me through.
Well, that was us doing the easy part. You did all the hard work here. This is such an inspiring. We have so many questions that unfortunately we're not going to get to. I'm gonna kind of skip ahead to maybe some funny ones here. Are you well or somewhat lighthearted? Are you trying to break the world record for most consecutive days of running, or have you just totally lost it? And that's coming from our dear friend Noah Freebird Osborne here in Denver.
Freebird, what's up, dog? The answer is I've totally lost it. No, there's it's almost untouchable, man. I mean, I started this streak at 42 or 43. There's I have a friend who's his basketball coach, he played in college. His basketball coach has quietly gone about running for like 35 straight years.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of people on social media, who put
Sure.
themselves out there on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
There are actually a surprising number of people who you'll never hear of who have, maybe impossible for me to ever reach. So
Just the labor of love, man. That's awesome.
yeah.
Another great question from Charles Walker. How do your knees feel?
They feel good, man. I'll be honest with you. They feel good. My coach, Chris Hout, did the most amazing job. Not only was I floating for that whole race, physically, I was 100% at the end of that marathon. So that was help. There is something amazing, Charles, about being boringly consistent, about just going and doing it every day. Yeah. And there is also something kind of truly amazing of, I think when these little, my running coach calls them niggles, these little pains, these little injuries, and I don't necessarily injuries, these little pains. If you don't allow yourself the kind of excuse to quit through those, I'm telling you, it's weird. They kind of magically go away.
That's wild. Yeah, for sure. Well, man, I wish I could get these. There's so many great questions in the chat here. I wish I could get to them all. I want to be respectful of our time and members of our community. I know some are dialing in from the East Coast here. Thank you, everyone. Just one final shout out from somebody here. Thank you. Amazing and inspiring. I'll start off with 2 miles tomorrow. No excuses.
Yeah, let's go. That just made my day.
Hell yeah. And just in closing, just want to thank you, Ben. You and the partnership with Velocity Global, you have contributed. Again, there's leadership support, there's inspiration, there's volunteerism, there's employee engagement. There's so many levels that you all hit on. I think you've approached upwards of $2 million in total contributions to our mission. That just helps us accelerate the pace of impact, reaching more people, getting those within our community out for adventures, building those lifelong bonds, building community when otherwise it often doesn't exist. And tell you what, man, just following your story has been incredibly inspiring. Definitely humbled and honored to call you a friend, and just incredibly overwhelmed with gratitude for all you do to support our beautiful community.
Thanks, Wolf. I really appreciate that, and it means the world to me that you all took time out of your day to listen to this. I hope if anything, it just inspires you, like someone just said, to go out and go exercise tomorrow, and go out and challenge by choice and do something that seems even a little bit impossible. It is truly in all of us. Every participant finished from 13 to 80, and so we have it all in us as well. And the true magic comes when we break through those really hard times, and it's whether your diagnosis, or challenging yourself in other aspects of your life. Let this be a small little challenge to you today. And I'd love to hear from you, to hear what that challenge is.
Heck yeah, I hit Ben up on Instagram. He's pretty active over there. And I know with some of these questions, maybe we can get those in a follow on here. But thank you so much for your time, my friend. Just incredibly moved by just following this whole experience and everything that you've done for our community. For those joining in, we're here for you. Be there for each other, and we'll look forward to seeing you out there, out living it here before long, somewhere along the path. Thank you so much for joining in.
Sure.
And have a great evening.
Much love.